Good evening. Welcome to Weekly Wine News with Matt Denune. Global wine production slumped to its lowest level in more than 50 years in 2017 after vines in the world's top three producers, France, Spain, and Italy, were ravaged by both incredibly hot and cold weather throughout the year. Regions hit the hardest include those producing Rioja and Prosecco, which make large quantities of affordable wine sold in supermarkets. The International Organization of Vine and Wine estimates global wine production dropped 8% to 247 million hectoliters in 2017, leading to the worst global harvest since 1961. 1 hectoliter is the equivalent to 133 standard wine bottles, so the fall in output equates to 2.9 billion fewer bottles. The Bordeaux Wine Council said production in what is France's largest wine-growing region was down 40%, with vineyards in Saint-Emilion worst affected by the severe frost. But while some chateaux lost up to 90% of their harvest, others escaped with little to no damage. One wine industry source said this perfect storm will cause price pressure in 2 places, right at the top end in premium red and in entry-level wine. In other news, Wine Intelligence has compiled and published its first ever global wine brand power index based on consumer data from 16,000 wine drinker interviews across 15 markets, representative of over 380 million wine drinkers. Rather than being based on volume of sales, the index is compiled based on how much of a connection a brand has with consumers. The most powerful brands at a global level are driven by 2 factors: success in the U.S. market as the largest market for wine globally, and consistently strong rankings across a number of important global markets. Yellowtail emerged as the #1 most powerful brand in both the USA and Canada, placing as well in the top 10 showings in Australia, China, Ireland, Japan, South Korea, and the UK. The #2 brand, Castillero del Diablo, holds in the top 5 positions in China, UK, South Korea, Sweden, as well as #1 rankings in Ireland, Brazil, and its domestic Chilean market. Mouton Cadet and Constellation's Woodbridge brands take a joint 3rd spot in the global ranking, based on their strong showing in the US market. Elsewhere, in France, a national wine dispute continues. France's health minister, Agnès Buzyn, and a host of doctors who have rallied behind her have launched a critical debate that has shocked the multi-billion-dollar wine industry and divided ranks even within the French government. Buzyn and her allies are responding to the long-standing claims by the wine industry that wine is different from other types of alcohol. Buzyn argues that their point is not to attack wine, but to raise public consciousness that wine as a type of alcohol can have in excessive quantities the same deleterious effects as beer, vodka, and whiskey. In response, President Emmanuel Macron said he enjoys wine every day with lunch and dinner, and contends that there is a difference between wine and other libations. Macron went on to say there is a public health scourge when young people get drunk at an accelerated speed with alcohol or beer, but that's not the case with wine. He added that he did not support any heightened regulations that industry leaders feared Buzyn would pursue. In response, 9 prominent doctors published an open letter in France's Le Figaro newspaper responding to Macron for disseminating what they see as false information and bad advice. Given that they cited alcohol as a leading cause for 50,000 deaths in France, they further argued that what matters in terms of toxicity is the amount of alcohol drunk, and that French consumption of alcoholic beverages, though declining for half a century, remains one of the strongest in Europe. Understandably, the wine industry is not too pleased. In Napa, a proposal to protect oak trees and streams has many in the wine industry worried about its future. In June, Napa residents will vote on Measure C, also known as the Napa County Watershed and Oak Woodland Protection Initiative of 2018. Proponents argue its goal is to amend the county's zoning rules to further protect Napa's streams, watersheds, wetlands, and oak forests. Opponents, including many of the local wine industry trade groups, fear the initiative will needlessly restrict hillside vineyard development. The measure would tighten restrictions on the removal of oak trees. Only 795 acres of oak woodland could be removed around hills and mountains of the county. Once that limit is reached, landowners would need a special permit to cut down trees, and they would need to replace 3 times as many trees as they remove, or preserve additional acreage elsewhere. Perhaps most significant, new vineyards would not qualify as a reason for special permits to be granted, while other projects, such as cell towers and electric vehicle charging stations, would qualify. The measure would also create new standards for buffers near streams, prohibiting tree removal from 25 to up to 150 feet from the water, depending on the stream classification. One potential flaw at the forefront of opponents' minds is that the measure's oak removal limit of 795 acres is based on the acreage on September 1st, 2017. The following month, the Atlas, Tubbs, and Nunn wildfires drastically changed the landscape. The fires burned over an estimated 30,000 acres in Napa County, many of which include oak woodlands. A legal analysis of the measure conducted by a firm hired by county supervisors showed that the fire further complicated the 795-acre cap. The language of the measure doesn't differentiate the different ways to interpret damage from fires created by Mother Nature or burned as a result of a backfire set by firefighters. Voters will decide on Measure C on June 5th. According to a result from an online poll released by the Wine Origins Alliance at VinExpo, New York, some 94% of American wine drinkers, support laws that would protect consumers from misleading wine labels. The Alliance, formed in 2005, includes representatives from wine regions in the United States, Europe, and Australia. They want legislation or regulation that protects the name of the wine region on a bottle's label. Carl Money, the founding member of the Texas Wine Growers, states that Texas has been making wine since the 1600s, noting its distinctive climate and land does influence the winemaking process. Thus, the Texas name should not be used on the label if the wine wasn't produced there. Money states that some Texas wineries buy their grapes from California, but call it Texas wine. He believes that's misleading the consumer, and apparently so do consumers. Though Texas is used as an example the same should be true for Long Island, Napa Valley, Champagne, Sherry, Chablis, Chianti Classico, Bordeaux, and all other wine-growing regions. In California has recently adopted regulations addressing agricultural pesticide application near public schools and licensed daycare centers, which provide minimum distance standards for certain pesticide applications and require annual notifications. The goal of the regulation is to reduce the chances of unintended pesticide exposure to children and increase communication between growers, the County Agricultural Commission, and school sites. The regulations prohibit growers from making certain types of pesticide applications within a quarter mile of a school Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Exceptions would be made when the school is closed for the day. Growers will also have to provide written notification of all agricultural pesticides that may be used in a field within a quarter mile of a school site. Many in the agricultural community claim they already follow ethical and sustainable practices, and the regulations would make work more time-consuming for farmers. In more interesting news, Deborah Brenner, founder and president of Women of the Vine and Spirits, announced that the trade organization is conducting a survey with Indiana University senior Parker Dean to learn why women are underrepresented in leadership positions in the industry. Brenner and Dean both recognize there's insufficient research to discern whether women in the beverage alcohol industry are simply facing the same adversities as women in other businesses, or if the discrimination stems from reasons specifically related to the nature of the alcohol industry. According to the open letter, they're asking women to take a survey which is based on voluntary disclosure, where all company information will remain confidential. In comparison, British companies with 250 employees or more are required to reveal the gender pay gap between male and female employees in April. Diageo, whose brands include Johnnie Walker, Tanqueray, and Bullet, released their information back in November. They found that between their two companies, one covering Scotland and one covering Great Britain, there was a median pay gap of 8.6%. That compared favorably with the median pay gap of 18.8% among other major British companies that reported early results to Britain's Office of National Statistics. In obituaries, Nicholas Hahn, the founder of California's Hahn Family Wines and a pioneer of Monterey County's Santa Lucia Highlands wine region, died March 2nd at his home in Zurich, Switzerland. He's 81 years old. Hahn was instrumental in gathering his growing group of vintners and achieving appellation status for the region in 1991. He was a pillar of the community and will be remembered. That's the wine news this week. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Denune.